red corner, blue corner. Right here on Stadium, I got my guy Jake Butt sitting right here with me. The Michigan great tight end, was a captain, a true leader of men up there in Ann Arbor.
And I got my man Joshua Perry, also a captain, a national champion, and the man that we need to help us break down the big matchup for his alma mater, Ohio State versus Penn State this weekend.
Yeah, there's a huge game, as you mentioned. It's going to be played at noon. I know there's a lot of consternation about that amongst Buckeye fans. Maybe Penn State fans happy that they get to go on the road and not play at night against Ohio State, but we've got that one coming up. And you and I have decided that both of these teams are very good, right?
Yes.
There's a lot to like about either one of them. The Penn State defense is playing on a completely different level right now. I think Ohio State has taken steps on that side of the ball. But when we start to break down the offenses, there are questions, and I think we're going to help you answer some of them today. Before we get started on that, we wanted to welcome you guys in. Of course, get in that YouTube chat. We'll play your comments through here, and we want you to scan the QR code on the screen and answer the poll question for us today: who wins on Saturday versus Ohio State and Penn State? But let's start with Ohio State's run game, right? I think Kyle McCord is a question mark in this game, but the guys that he's throwing it to, I think, give confidence. But as we look at Ohio State's run game, offensive line has been challenged this year. Last week they played Purdue without TreVeyon Henderson. Mayan Williams, Chip Trayanum gets hurt in that football game, averaging just 135 yards on the ground per game. I mean, what are you seeing here? Like, what stands out to you about the run game?
To me, it stood out to me going back to the offseason when the conversation was, how do they replace C.J. Stroud? And I said, before we talk about this, we have to say, how do you replace 3 offensive linemen that got drafted? And my theory was they would struggle there. And that theory has been proven true. And the big reason that this applies is they had a lot of success on the run game last year. Remember that TreVeyon Henderson gash that kind of opened the game up late in the fourth quarter? They're going to need to do that. About 75% of the struggles for the Buckeyes, I have to put on the offensive line. I haven't seen 60 minutes of dominance. I haven't seen 60 minutes of O-line unit quality play. And the fearful thing for Buckeye fans, I'm not saying this is going to cost them the game, but it's a huge thing. You're playing against the fastest defensive front that I've seen in college football this year. They present a lot of challenges. They need the run game to get going to play complementary football. But for another reason, Joshua, you do not want to be in obvious passing situations against this Manny Diaz-led Penn State defense. They will bring the pressure. That will be on the offensive line.
I agree with you on that. I think as much as you can help Kyle McCord with establishing run, it's going to be important. And I'm also there with you that a lot of the issues for the offense goes back to the offensive line. I look at 2 games, and I think they tell different stories. Against Notre Dame, Ohio State had their best rushing game in terms of yards per carry against a Power 5 opponent this year. They were, 4.6 or something in that neighborhood. Not lighting the world on fire, but certainly keeps you on schedule when you can run it like that. Then you go to the Maryland game where they were held under 2 yards per carry. I think part of that was schematic. I think there was also, reviewing the tape, the offensive line struggled to climb because the Maryland defensive line, grabbing some guys up front. You got to be better than that, right? You can't let that be an excuse. What also happened against Maryland is that was the first game where we didn't get to see TreVeyon Henderson. You and I talked about this, and I think this is the biggest thing for me, is when you start to evaluate an offensive line like Ohio State's, the gaps go like this. They go like this. They go like this. They're not open for this long, and then they come together. They go like this. You know the guy who's been hitting it the hardest this year for the Buckeyes? It's TreVeyon Henderson. He's got that burst. He's got that speed. It's a different gear when he has the ball in his hands. I think his health is going to be paramount to Ohio State's ability to establish a run.
There's another piece of this, too, because I look at Penn State's defense, and that's a downhill defense. When you run laterally, that plays into Penn State hands. They have the speed to run laterally with you. When I look at the film, one of the weakest points of Penn State is their interior defensive line. When a team's downhill, sometimes you just want to run it right into the teeth. So, yes, TreVeyon Henderson. Another piece of this is that's your veteran. He's one of your best pass-protecting running backs. That matter. Here's one stat for you. Penn State averaging 4.5 sacks per game. That's #1 nationally. 4.5 sacks per game. Why does that matter? Well, the run game isn't just about the run game. It's to help out Kyle McCord. There's two Kyle McCords. There's the Kyle McCord with the clean pocket. Here's his numbers. 70% completion rate, 11 yards per completion.
Yep.
Kyle McCord under pressure.
Go ahead.
38% completion.
Not good.
Not even 2 yards per attempt. When Ohio State has faced 6 or more rushers this year, 50% of the time they're giving up pressure. You need the run game to get in favorable passing situations, and you need the run game to help complement a passing attack to get Penn State on their heels. You do not want to sit back and let that defensive front roll.
We got to save those numbers there because you bring up a really interesting point in the pass game when I know this is a run game show right now. If Kyle McCord makes Penn State pay early on when they bring pressure, it's going to hurt them really bad because they've got good cover guys. Ohio State's got really good receivers. That's a battle to watch we'll probably dive into tomorrow. Now I want to talk about the Penn State side of this thing because their run game has certainly struggled too. And you've got, Katron Allen, Nick Singleton. We're talking about maybe the best running back room in the United States of America. Katron Allen only has one game of 100 yards or more on the ground. Nick Singleton hasn't broken the century mark yet this season. They're averaging, Singleton is averaging 3.8 yards per carry this year. He was close to 7 a year ago.
Stat.
And they don't have the explosive runs. They don't get the runs over 20 yards here. Why can't they get the ground game going is the question.
It's a few different things. And you think about what makes up an explosive run. It's not just the O-line and tight ends. Really, to take a 5-yard run and turn it into explosive, what you're looking at is wide receiver blocking. They need to dig out the safeties and ear hole them. They need to block downfield. And then it's on your running backs to make someone miss. In order to make someone miss, you need space. So that part of it's on the O-line. But I will play devil's advocate here because I want to look at this from another perspective.
Yep.
Just like with Jim Knowles' defense, in order to be aggressive, you have to give something up. You're a little bit vulnerable in the back end. Okay, in order to be explosive, you have to give something up. You take a risk. Okay, they're not explosive, but they don't have negative plays. There's a stat called stuff rate, meaning when you call a run, how often do you get 0 or few yards on the run? Penn State is second best nationally. They rarely go backwards. So by that measure, even if you get 2 yards on first and second down, now you're in 3rd and 6. You don't need an explosive to convert. You can play right into your game. So I think Penn State, even though they don't have these explosives, they're happy getting into 3rd and manageable, and they feel really good that they can convert.
Yeah, I just think it becomes a problem, right? Because I asked the question, what defense have they faced this year that is close to what Ohio State has?
None.
Because, and I think the idea that they have not shown that they can be explosive. I mean, if I'm Ohio State, I am giving them all they can handle early on in the game, and I'm saying prove it, right? I'm trying to take the air out of that offense. And I think part of the reason why they have struggled to run the football is because they haven't been explosive throwing the football either. Why wouldn't I play my safeties close to the line of scrimmage? Why wouldn't I have them ready to trigger and run support? Right? There's not a wide receiver on that roster that scares me. And Drew Aller, for all the great things he did against West Virginia early on in the year, he hasn't gotten it done throwing the football as of late in terms of being a guy who can push it down the field. It becomes an intriguing back and forth to me because I think they are comfortable being on schedule, but also to this point, they haven't. I don't think they've been forced into a scenario where they have to maybe feel that urgency on offense to have that explosive.
Yeah, and that's something that has to. I think we both agree we're interested in this game. This is a game where I think both teams are saving something for the opponent.
No doubt.
So we'll see how that unfolds. We do have a viewer question here, Joshua. I think this is really interesting. Do you think the winner of this game, whether it's Ohio State or Penn State, deserves to be top 2? Why or why not?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could make a deserves, yes. If you're going to say deserves, absolutely, because they would have a marquee win, right? Like that would be probably the best win in college football up to this point. If it's Ohio State, now you would have the Notre Dame victory, plus you would have a win over Penn State. If you're Penn State, you would have West Virginia, which I know people are looking at as they're a 2-loss team right now, one of those losses being to Penn State, and then you would have the Ohio State win. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense. Do I think that they would be the number 2 team in the nation? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I think in order for that to happen, they need some help from Georgia. I think Michigan rolls this weekend, and we'll see how Georgia is without Bowers. I think the committee seems, as long as those 2 teams keep winning and looking good, that they're not going to budge. Though I agree with you. Should they? Probably so, particularly Ohio State having beat Notre Dame. Okay, let's go over to the West. We spent a lot of time talking Ohio State, Penn State. Two new coaches in the West made headlines this offseason. Matt Rule, head coach of Nebraska. Your former coach, Luke Fickell, head coach of Wisconsin. Wisconsin is coming off a tough loss. They are 4-2. Nebraska coming off a bye week. They are 3-3. Let's talk about midseason grades. Where are you at with these two programs?
I think with Nebraska, I'm feeling probably like a C right now, right?
Okay.
Because I like the way their defense is playing, certainly. And those guys have kind of been the mentality. And when you can get the defense going like this, which they've been able to do, I think it puts you in a position to feel like you have chances in games. Now, we've also seen where the games start to get away from them a little bit, and that indicates that maybe some of the players haven't turned over the mentality from the Scott Frost era. Their offense is a huge problem to me, though, right? Like, you have so many glaring issues, right? Quarterbacks, really running backs, both of the guys who are playing. The run game has been good.
Yeah.
You can't throw it at all. And I don't think the offensive line is as good as you would believe them to be based off of the run stats, because quarterback run is the equalizer there.
I'm laughing because this is the same argument we had with Iowa yesterday. You like good defense, but you hate bad offense.
I do.
And I'm saying, I came up with a B+ for Matt Rule.
Wow.
Because I think the context matters. The defense significantly improved.
Yes.
They're giving up over 100 yards less on the ground alone than last year. And that's implementing a new Tony White 3-3-5 scheme. I give them credit there.
Yep.
I also think about the context. When they lost to Minnesota this year, people said, man, is Nebraska cursed? Like, that's a hard thing to get off your back. That's on a head coach. And he's stayed true to be 500 at this point, even though it hasn't looked pretty. I give him credit. And I will say this. The quarterbacks, yes, they've been bad, but I also think that I give credit to Matt Rule, because it's hard to turn around a program when the quarterbacks played as poorly as they have.
Do we grade either of these guys maybe a little bit harder, considering that they also have to play in the West, right? Like, if you put either one of these two teams in the Big Ten East.
We should.
Yeah.
So maybe we should give Loxley some bonus.
We saw what happened to Nebraska when they played against Michigan. I know Michigan's one of the greatest teams in the land, but that would be their reality every single year in the East, right? And I know divisions are going away, but I just wanted to bring that up. We got to grade Wisconsin. I'll let you go first on this one. Where are you at with them?
So I had Rule in Nebraska as a B+. I have Fickell as a B, just slightly underneath him.
Okay.
You?
I would say he's probably a B. I think the biggest thing that he missed on was Tanner Mordecai, right? Like, he was supposed to be a huge impact transfer, and he's so up and down. And I think it takes away from the run game that they had been good at. And I think their defense has played fine, but again, still trying to find their footing there. I would say B- maybe.
We're used to seeing Wisconsin as a top defense in the country. They've regressed slightly, and you bring in Mordecai, and that has taken away from your commitment to running the football. That's on coaching, so slightly below.
All right, we're going to take our first break right here on Red Corner, Blue Corner, but coming up, the Wolverines and the Spartans, they are getting ready to renew their rivalry, but is there a little added incentive after what went down last year? We got to get Jake's thoughts on that coming up after the break.